Hello singers and whisperers, Aaron here, back with another video. As with all the X.3 patches, Fontaine's 4.3 patch will release with some brand new artifacts for us to toy with. But will these artifacts be situationally good, or will they end up being absolute blunders? Before we find out, I just want to say that if you like my content, then please take a bite out of that honey cookie flavored subscribe button down below. But with that, let's hop right in. Starting us off, we have the Song of Days Past, which is made specifically with healers in mind. The two-piece effect is simple, as it increases the healing done of the wielder by 15%. And we have the novel that grants the wielder two different states. So, in order to simplify this a little bit, let's talk about each state independently. The first one this effect grants is called the Yearning State, which occurs once the healer heals any party member, including themselves, and only one Yearning State can be active at a time. This state will only be cleared after 10 seconds. While this state is active, all healing that is done by any party member, including off-field party members, and overflow healing will be recorded up to a max of 30,000 healing. After the Yearning State ends, which again occurs only after 10 seconds, the party will be granted the waves from that day's state. This effect takes 3% of the number received from the Yearning State and converts it into a flat damage bonus. The maximum flat damage that can be received this way is 900. The flat damage bonus will be applied to the current on-field party member and can be consumed by damaging enemies using normal, charged, and plunging attacks, along with elemental skills and bursts. The waves from that day effect can be removed after 10 instances of this buff are applied, or after 10 seconds. Now that that's out of the way, let's note some important features of this set. The most important is the fact that the Yearning State can only be turned into the waves from that day state after 10 seconds. The problem with this is that most healers want to be used right before the main damage dealer in order to sustain them while they are on field. This DPS will also have a majority of the damage percent buffs used in a comp, which is important because this means that they will make the most use of this flat damage buff. However, most main DPS have a short window for dealing damage, which will usually be less than 10 seconds. This means that this buff will not go to the on-field damage dealer. Instead, it will activate toward the start of a rotation and go to the off-field party members, who are not a significant portion of the team's overall damage output. This would also be at the point where the characters do not have buffs active yet, which makes this buff even less beneficial. The way to mitigate this would be to use the heal toward the start of a rotation so the on-field party member could get these buffs. However, most heals are bursts or have a duration around 12 seconds, which means the on-field character would have no defenses. So how do we mitigate the issue? Well, that's where the next part comes into play. This set does state that two Yearning States cannot be active at once. However, it does not note that two waves from that day state, or that a wave from that day state and a Yearning State cannot be active at the same time. While the former technically can never happen and is rather irrelevant, the latter can, if the wielder has a duration on their heal that is longer than 10 seconds. This is usually the case, however, heals are usually not strong enough during the second 10-second duration in order to get max stacks. So, who can constantly proc this set while still having strong enough heals to reach the cap? There's only really three, those of which being Kokomi, Yao Yao, and Baizhu. Kuki Shinobu also has the potential to, but only while using a sacrificial sword. Otherwise, she can't. So how well does each of these characters use this new set? Let's start with the two Dendro units, since they both have the same issue. Both Yao Yao and Baizhu are part of the Dendro element, which excels at dealing damage through transformative reactions and flat damage buffs. This is mainly where the issue lies, as Bloom transformative reactions do not gain the bonus from the set, and the already present flat damage bonus from Quicken reduces the effectiveness of further flat damage bonuses. On top of that, if there is any portion of Dendro damage in the team other than from these two, Deepwood Memories will be a much more significant damage increase to the team over the flat damage this set offers. However, these two can be used as secondary Dendro units in team comps where someone else is wielding the Deepwood set. This makes them prime candidates to use this new set. However, this brings into question whether they should still use this set, as these two have the benefit of not relying too much on stats. This means they can both use the Instructor set, which offers 120 elemental mastery to the entire team. This is a massive buff for the team, but will it prove to be better than a flat damage bonus? For Nahida, Alhaitham, Yaimiko, and Sino, Instructors is much better, as it will increase their flat damage from Aggravate along with any other stats that their passives convert elemental mastery into. However, for Keqing and Official, this is not as clear, so I will use their damage when paired together. For both of these units, Instructors is still much stronger than other options, as it proves proves to be about 7% better than Noblesse or Tenacity, and 2% better than the Song of Days Past, if both Fischl and Keqing both used 10 fully stacked stacks. However, I believe this is being overly generous. If we reduce the amount of stacks both use to make it a bit more realistic, we can see that this new set will also be about 7% worse than the Instructor set, which is on par with Noblesse and Tenacity. This is, frankly speaking, incredibly bad, since it's so hard to proc the max value of the set and even harder to keep it consistent, so it doesn't work for any Dendro team. Good to know. But we still have Kokomi, who can still consistently proc this set and is viable outside of Dendro teams. So let's take a look at whether this set would be good for her alongside Ayaka and Shenhe in a freeze team. Taking a look, we could see that the set is better, but by less than 1%, considering the fact that if anything gets messed up along the way, or if any stack goes to any unit other than Ayaka, which would be incredibly common since Ayaka would be on field for just a few seconds, this optimistic look at the damage numbers in this comp will be considerably higher than what would actually take place. So it's clear, when using any of these healers as supports for the team, swapping to this new artifact set will usually be a downgrade compared to using their current best sets. But what if these healers want to use the set as a main DPS set? Let's use the prime DPS healer Kokomi as a test subject. While this might seem a bit counterproductive, since Kokomi comes with a lot of base damage modifiers, she is the only support healer that can be used as a main DPS and who has enough healing at the start of a rotation to make use of this buff. So let's compare her damage with this new artifact to her damage with the Clam set. In total, the Clam set will prove to be about 12 to 27% more effective than the Song set, even when trading out the HP Goblet or a Hydro damage one, and when using both Fiorina's massive percent damage buffs as well as Kazuha's. This set also suffers in AoE situations due to its stack quota, which Clam doesn't have. This means that the damage difference will be even greater in AoE situations. So what's the point of this set? Every other set in the game is much more consistent, with either the same upsides or better upsides than the Song of Days Past. The only other spot I could see the set working well in is when it's used to support characters that don't scale with some of the best support sets, like Neuvillette, Fiorina, Yelan, and Albedo. These units all do not scale well with attack and elemental mastery, which make them all prime candidates for utilizing this buff. While this may not be an insane buff for these units, as it will prove to increase their damage by about 6%, give or take a few percent, it is still pretty good for all of them if you want to give them some extra damage. It is also good to note that this will be the best option for any character released in the future that doesn't scale with elemental mastery or attack. However, keep in mind that I am being overly optimistic with this set. Song of Days Past is incredibly situational and will not always buff the correct characters, nor will it always be maxed out. This means that in most scenarios, this set will end up performing even worse than what I have displayed. Now, before we move on to the next artifact set, I want to quickly mention this set's synergy with Xiao. This demon hunter has a masterful crap ton of damage percent available to him, which synergizes insanely well with this flat damage amount. He also just so happens to make up to 10 plunges in a rotation, which is the exact amount of stacks this set grants. This set is incredibly powerful with Xiao, and if there is a way to constantly proc it for him, it will increase his damage output by up to 20%. This is absolutely fantastic for him, and will be one of the best ways to buff Xiao's personal damage. However, again, this set is super conditional, and requires the perfect situation and team comp to make good use of it. Xiao also does not have a healer for his team that would make good use of this set, as Jean is his best, yet she doesn't have permanent uptime on her heal. But now we're done with crapping on the healer set. I didn't expect I'd take half the video talking about that monstrosity, but here we are. Anyway, let's move on to its sister, the Nighttime Whispers in the Echoing Woods. This set offers the basic 18% attack and the 2-piece, which can be very nice for many units. The 4-piece grants a 14% geo damage bonus to the wielder for 10 seconds when using an elemental skill. This effect will increase to 40% when the wielder is protected by a crystallized shield. This 24% geo damage bonus disappears if the wielder goes 1 second without a crystallized shield. The Nighttime Whisper set is much more simple than the one before, as it is just stat boost for the wielder. However, most Geo characters don't revolve their damage around attack, and instead like a good amount of defense, or in Zhongli's case, HP. On top of this, the extra 24% Geo damage bonus can only be retained while on field, as swapping off would take away the crystallized shield from the user. So the only characters that can get any benefit at all from this set are Navia, Ningguang, and Noelle. However, Noelle gets a lot of flat attack from building directly into defense. It's so much so that the Husk set still sits as her best all-around artifact set, as it's still about 8% better, while Maréchaussée is better by about 12% if it can be consistently activated. The set was made for Navia, so obviously it would be her best as she has no real alternative. The same can be said for Ningguang, but how much better would this be compared to what we have available right now? At the current moment, a 2-piece of attack and 2-piece of geo damage is the best for these two characters, which equates to 1% less geo damage bonus than a 4-piece Nighttime Whispers without a crystallized shield. Obviously, this is a better artifact, but by how much? For Navia, I'm not entirely sure because I'm still waiting to see the area of her elemental skill and how it works against enemies. However, I am calculating somewhere around a 10% damage increase on average, but I'll go more over that in her own dedicated video when I have a decent grasp on how her skill targets. For Ningguang, my numbers are much more set in stone, pun not intended. The extra 24% geo damage bonus is massive for her, especially since her entire kit deals near equal amounts of damage. With this new set, Ningguang's damage ends up increasing by around 7% across the board. This may not be insane, but this is still a pretty good damage increase to her total damage output. While there are only 2 characters that want this artifact set, it does prove to be their best in slot option, and in my opinion, it's a set actually worth farming given you want to use the characters. With all that in mind, how good is this new domain? Is it worth farming, or would it be better to just ignore it? All around, I'd say this new domain is one of the worst in the game at the current moment. One option is an incredibly situational and unreliable healer's buffing tool that only becomes incredibly good when paired with massive percent damage bonuses, while the other is a geo set usable on only 2 characters. So instead of wasting resin here, I'd recommend sticking toward the current overpowered and versatile artifacts available. But with artifacts over, let's move on to the 2 new claymores, starting with the best. This beautiful cardboard creation is riddled with stickers from the Melusines and has a name reminiscent of a creation of Tiny Tina's from the Borderlands series. The Ultimate Overlord's Mega Magic Sword is the best weapon in the game. You can now smack a god around with a piece of cardboard, come on, this is absolute perfection. This whimsical masterpiece comes with a high base attack and a low energy recharge substat, which is an incredible stat spread to start out with, since all Claymore users have harsher energy needs and all rely on a large attack stat for damage. Additionally, the passive for this weapon increases the wielder's attack stat by 12 to 24%, and then increases this amount by up to double based on how many Melusine you have helped in your game. This is a phenomenal passive since all Claymore users would love that additional attack percent. While this weapon may seem lackluster when we consider other weapon archetypes which have had a similar weapon like this been introduced only for it to be thrown in the trash, we have to remember that Claymores suck. The only 4-star Claymores that have ever been good are Favoni's Greatsword for supports, Serpent Spine in the Battle Pass, and then there's the free-to-play Luxurious Sea Lord, which is just okay. Every other 4-star Claymore out there is either very niche or just straight up bad. This stat spread is neither of those things, which instantly makes this slab of paper one of the better Claymores in the game. But how good is it? And is it better than the free-to-play fish we have available? Let's take a look at Eula's damage with these 2 weapons. I'm using her first because her teams like to run Superconduct, which will increase the fish's damage even more than it would in other teams. On top of that, most of her damage comes from her burst, which the fish helps increase. Despite these benefits, the new Cardboard King completely shows the fish up, as it proves to be about 23% more effective than it. In fact, it can end up being about as good as the Serpent's Spine, and even the Wolf's Gravestone for her. This is because it offers an incredible amount of attack, putting her behind the Wolf's Gravestone by only about 100. But let's put the ball further into the fish's court by using Freminet. Freminet has lower scalings than Eula, and a lower damage output in general, so item proc damage usually forms a larger portion of his overall damage output when compared to other characters. But even here, the new paper powerhouse is still stronger, this time by about 16%. I could go over every other Claymore character, but even with them, this weapon will still be one of the best out there. It's so strong that it can even contend with the next weapon, Navia's signature. The Considered Judgment offers a high base attack with a low crit rate. Its passive offers a 20 to 40% attack outright and an 18 to 32% elemental skill damage increase for 15 seconds when someone in the party obtains a crystallized shard. This effect can be stacked twice, up to a max of 32 to 64% elemental skill damage. This weapon is, oddly enough, not much better than the Ultimate Overlord's Mega Magic Sword, since most Claymore users want a bit of energy recharge. When considering artifact stats, the only benefit to using the Considered Judgment over the Overlord's sword would be an average of 100 extra attack and the conditional 32% skill damage bonus. Despite this, the new quote-unquote Claymore is still incredibly good and turns out to be one of the best out there. Let's take another look at Eula as an example, as she works well with the Geo character and without it. When paired with Zhongli, Eula is able to make extreme use out of the new axe, as it turns into her second best weapon. It's still good even without a Geo character for the skill damage though, as it turns out to be her third best weapon behind Beacon of the Reed Sea in terms of damage. This turns out to be rather consistent for all Claymore characters too, as Beacon tends to just surpass Considered Judgment when its passive cannot be used consistently. So should you get this weapon, while it is incredibly powerful as it's about on par with the best Claymore in the game, I would recommend against it, especially since we're getting the crazy powerful free-to-play cardboard Claymore, which will just be a few percent behind the axe in terms of damage output. But now it's time for me to pass the conversation. What do you all think of these new weapons and artifacts? Are you going to use the new set on the healer despite everything? Do you plan to get the new axe for your account? Are you excited about the Ningguang buffs that are finally coming out? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. But with that, I will wish you all farewell. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!